Hi YouTube, Darth here. It's been a while since my last yes or no video, and I've been holding off on this series because there are some major changes coming in the September patch. So I picked a class of weapons that's not changing a whole bunch, shotguns. Specifically, today I'll be reviewing the Saiga 12K, a semi-automatic shotgun available to every class. So should you be using the Saiga 12K? Yes or no? Yes. In general, shotguns have their strengths and their weaknesses, but the Saiga 12K is a very good middle-of-the-road shotgun. Let's look at some of the good things about the Saiga 12K. Among shotguns, the recoil of this weapon is the most controllable, with a first shot recoil multiplier of only 1x and a combined deviation that is equaled only by the DBV12. At 200 rounds per minute, it has a pretty typical rate of fire for a semi-automatic shotgun. Combine this with 9 pellets per shot and you've got a more than lethal pellet count per shot. This adds up to a lot of damage in a short time. With an ammo load of 9 shells, it's fairly middling in ammo count. There are semi-automatics that have more, but 9 will handle most encounters. It's a magazine-fed shotgun, which means you have a longer individual reload but a shorter time to fully reload your weapon. This is both a positive and a negative. The spread on the Saiga 12K buckshot is tied with the UTS-15 for the lowest spread of all the shotguns. This gives it a nicely focused ring of devastation that will blow a hole clean through your enemies. Other than that, it's a pretty typical semi-automatic shotgun. But compared to its peers, let's look at the not-so-good things. The reload time is the worst among the semi-automatic shotguns. It has a 2.2 second shell in the chamber reload time, which actually isn't that bad among most of the magazine-fed weapons. However, the empty reload time of 3.5 seconds is really something awful. Like all shotguns, the range of the Saiga 12K is limited to close to mid-range. The slug round can push this a bit further, but the exceptionally slow speed of the slug makes it very difficult to use at range. To its credit though, the Saiga 12K performs exceptionally well at the close to mid-ranges. Still, if you and an enemy encounter each other at mid-range, the enemy is going to win most of the time. So in reality, the limitations of the Saiga 12K are primarily the limitations of the shotguns themselves. One drawback that I didn't mention is actually very hard to quantify. Shotguns seem to be very susceptible to what the Battlefield community commonly refers to as netcode issues. It's gotten better since launch and even better on the CTE, but if you spend enough time hip-firing shotguns, you'll see this pretty regularly. You'll have the weapon practically buried in an enemy only to miss. Or you'll have your sights dead on and the pellets do not seem to go anywhere at all or magically go through your target. With shotguns, you'll notice this frequently when you and your target are closer than 2 meters and you're both rapidly moving. The only way I've found to escape this problem is to take a step back when you're this close and continue firing. Beyond extreme close range, it helps to aim down sights. But for the most part, the Saiga 12K is a very solid weapon for CQB battles, and I find that the features of this weapon definitely make up for the shortcomings of the shotgun class. There's not really a lot of control required for the Saiga 12K. Its recoil pattern is very modest, with a recoil of 1.2 up, negative 0.2 left, and 0.8 right. Uncontrolled, that recoil means that the weapon will tend to go up and to the right. The only time you're really going to feel this recoil pattern is with slug rounds. The weapon is easy enough to counter by simply pulling down slightly on your aim and maintaining your crosshair on your target. This is going to mean pulling down and to the left. Realistically, you'd have to try pretty hard to have the recoil be a problem on this weapon. You can control the spread with how often you fire the weapon, but at close range this really isn't a deciding factor when 1 to 3 shots are going to be killing your target. Throwing a choke onto this weapon is probably the quickest way to control the spread of the weapon. In fact, the weapon changes dramatically depending on your loadout, which I will get to later in this video. The primary limitation of the Saiga 12K is its range. As a shotgun, you're going to almost exclusively want to use this on close quarters segments of maps. With buckshot, if you and an enemy have each other in the sights beyond close range, you're going to be in some trouble. Most of your pellets are going to miss and you'll only come out on top if they can't aim. But because long-range engagements are inevitable, I typically like to have some kind of long-range backup to this weapon. As assault or recon, I'll have some kind of pistol with long-range capability. As engineer, rocket sniping will do nicely. And as support, the UCAV is a definite go-to for picking off pesky snipers. That being said, your loadout can really determine how you play this weapon. With buckshot or flechettes at close to mid-range, you can quickly overwhelm your enemies with the firepower that this weapon provides. The number of shells in this weapon, combined with the damage potential, means that you can drop an entire room full of enemies in a single pass. If you feel the need, this weapon can also do great work at mid-range with carefully aimed slug shots. Up to 31 meters, a slug round is a one-shot headshot kill even against body armor. 2 shots to the body will drop any target at close range. With slug rounds, I recommend stopping, aiming down sights, and taking your shot. If you try to hipfire or strafe side to side while using slugs, you're going to miss your target 9 out of 10 times. Without getting too in depth, I'll cover ammo more specifically in the next section of this video. I want to talk a bit about the difficulty shotguns have with range deficiencies. For the most part, the spread on the pellets is going to render flechette and buckshot useless beyond close to medium range. The close quarters nature of the Saiga 12K can be broken down to this advice. Don't try to attack enemies with automatic weapons head on. You're going to lose. Don't try to get to a CQB area if it means running over open ground and enemies are watching. You're going to lose. Instead, a tactic that's more effective for confronting multiple enemies is to take up a position behind cover or around a corner and wait for your enemies to come to you. The shotguns are most effective when used while cornering and at close range. Make those enemies come to you where your weapon easily beats them. Unless they know exactly where you are and free fire the corner, you're going to win the engagement almost all of the time. I also want to talk about the benefits of aiming down sights versus hip firing with this weapon. Hip firing on shotguns can be kind of iffy in Battlefield 4 because of netcode issues. But for the most part, you'll want to hip fire enemies that are closer than 10 meters. Beyond that range, aim down sights and stop moving as it will give you a much tighter spread on pellets. You can get away with strafing and using ADS with pellets, but stopping with ADS is definitely mandatory for slug rounds. So, in summary, remember to engage your enemies where it benefits you. The Saiga 12K is a room broom. Even if you get caught by a bunch of enemies, you'll surprise yourself with just how many you can dispatch in a very short amount of time with the Saiga 12K. Shotguns are pretty interesting when it comes to loadouts and attachments. For the Saiga 12K, this is no different. You can end up customizing the weapon for your particular needs pretty well, and in addition to my preferred attachments, I'll be covering some possible alternatives. As with all my weapon loadouts, I like to consult BF4 stats and see what the top players are running on their weapons. For the Saiga 12K, there was a near consensus on their loadout. I ended up trying a multitude of loadouts with the Saiga 12K, but I found that the best overall setup was the following. First, I want to talk about the ammo type I'm using for this recommended loadout, buckshot. Buckshot has a 0.84 multiplier to the chest and is further reduced by the defensive perk. This means the chest shots are going to have their damage reduced from 18 damage per pellet to roughly 13 damage per pellet. If you land all 9 pellets, that comes out to about 117 damage or slightly more than lethal. But keep in mind, not every pellet is likely to land on your target. For the semi-automatic Saiga 12K, even when you miss 50% of your pellets, the second shot will almost certainly finish off the target. Because the second shot in the Saiga 12K can be fired much quicker than a pump action, this lets you get that critical follow-up shot in a situation where you miss some or all of your pellets. Additionally, the Saiga 12K has the best spread for buckshot among shotguns, so that's a definite plus to using this ammo type on this weapon. For the optic, I gravitated towards the Coyote red dot sight. It's a nice, clean optic with a lot of visibility, which is key for a dedicated close quarters weapon. Magnification beyond this range is not at all worthwhile if you are using buckshot. If you prefer the Cobra or Reflex, then I encourage you to use what feels comfortable for you. As with most of my loadouts these days, my secondary of choice was the laser sight. It's hard to beat an even tighter spread on your target at close range. If you want to lessen your visibility to enemies, you simply need to remember to turn this secondary off while stealthing around the map. You shouldn't be engaging enemies head-on at mid-range, so this is really a no-brainer for a CQB weapon like the Saiga 12K. Now, the barrel is purely a usage choice and one with which I struggle to find a favorite. Overall, I think the best choice here is the full choke. It helps alleviate the biggest flaw with this weapon, the spread of the shots at range. Because you're not always going to be at extremely close range, I think it gives the weapon more versatility. But for killing ability to extremely close range, I really like the duckbill. The duckbill gives just a bit more leniency and poor aim at close range. Between these two, it really comes down to how you intend to use the weapon. So for general use, full choke. For guaranteed close quarters, duckbill. Finally, for the underbarrel, you should be going with the ergo or vertical grips. With as much movement as you're going to do, and given that this weapon is a CQB blaster, attachments that favor hipfire are going to be mandatory. They'll tighten up the spread of your weapon while on the move, and they'll help keep you a hard target while cleaning out a whole room. Now that I've talked about my preferred loadout, I want to talk a bit about alternatives for this weapon to play to certain choices. I've already talked about the trade-offs between the full choke and the duckbill, so let's look at the choice of ammo. If you really want to do some damage at medium range and further, you can opt to go with the slug rounds. For slugs, I'd recommend a 1x scope, compensator, and folding or angled grips, as they'll help take some of the edge off the recoil on this weapon. But because the slug round travels at only 300 meters per second on live, it's quite a difficult task to land hits on a moving target at range. Starting with the upcoming fall patch, the speed of slug rounds has been increased to 380 meters per second from 300 meters per second, so landing these shots should be easier in the future. But ultimately, slug rounds turn this weapon into kind of a crappy DMR. So ultimately, whether you should use this weapon comes down to if you can overcome the shortcomings of the shotguns themselves. But if we're comparing it to other shotguns, it's definitely one of the best and a definite yes. If you find that it isn't your kind of close quarters weapon, you might also want to try a fast-firing carbine like the MTAR-21 or the ACWR. Additionally, the ACWR provides some good mid-range capability that the shotguns simply do not have. If you like the Saiga 12K, you might also like the DBV-12, which is very similar and carries more ammo, if also possessing a slightly increased recoil and slightly worse spread on buckshot. That's it for this episode of Yes or No. If you found this video helpful or insightful, please leave it a like. If there's something you think I missed, or if you have a different weapon you prefer in close quarters situations, please leave a comment below. Be sure to leave a comment if you have a weapon you'd like to see in a future episode of Yes or No. If this is your first time here, be sure to check out my channel and please consider subscribing. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time, YouTube.